All right, everyone, welcome to our webinar on leveraging Tidal to advance your cloud initiatives. Let's dive in with our agenda. Fred, can you advance that?
I did. My screen says agenda.
There we are. Sorry, I have a bit of a lag. My apologies. All right, so for our agenda for today, we're going to start out by providing an overview of our extensive cloud capabilities. So, many of these capabilities have been in the product and around for quite a few years. They're being used extensively by our customer base, but we still get a lot of questions about them. So we thought that might be a good place to start. From there, then we'll go in and provide a demo of our AWS EC2 and S3 adapters. After that demo, we'll go into detail on our future plans in and for the cloud, with Tom O'Rourke providing us with the cloud roadmap that currently is in place. And then we will try to leave 10 to 15 minutes at the end for a Q&A session. So speaking of Q&A, want to go to the housekeeping slide, Fred?
There.
So all participants will be in listen-only mode. We will be recording the session and we will post it on our customer portal. But if you do want to submit questions, please use the WebEx Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen, and we'll answer as many of those questions as possible at the end. If we don't get to them all, we'll try to answer them and post them along with the recording on the portal. So without further ado, why don't we dive in with an overview of our cloud capabilities. Do you want to go to the next one? Perfect. So, years of experience in the cloud, right? I mean, we are cloud agnostic. We're certified with all the major providers, or at least the ones that we view as the major providers and that you view. So certified with AWS, certified with Azure, Oracle Cloud, OCI, and Google Cloud as well. If there are others, we probably work in others as well. It just doesn't, we haven't tested them, right? So if there are other clouds that you're using outside of this, certainly let us know. We'd be happy to add it to our testing and certification as well if it makes sense. But these are the ones that we've had customers currently running in that have told us, we need to test it, we need to certify it. So those are ones that we currently support. And we've been doing this for quite a few years, as I mentioned before, right? So in 2016 was really where we started helping customers move into the cloud. And we started out with customers looking to do really a hybrid approach, right? So they were doing mainly on-prem, right? They were running Tidal on-prem. Maybe they used our VMware adapter and did a private cloud. We had some customers start there. But eventually they started moving, and for us, it was AWS was the first one that customers started going to. So they started running our agents out there, running some on-prem and agents out in the cloud as well. We had customers very soon after start doing the same thing in Azure. And then we even had a couple that were using multiple clouds, right? They were testing out, okay, we're not sure where we want to go. We're going to run jobs in both. And so they would do a hybrid approach with multi-clouds and on-prem. So we had some experience there. Then in 2017, we had our first customer, a major healthcare company, look to move their entire Tidal deployment into the cloud. So their masters, their client managers, databases, everything, in this case, was moved into AWS. And shortly after, we had several others follow. We had a major bank that moved their entire data center into AWS, so they moved Tidal along with it. In 2018, we had another large financial institution that moved their entire Tidal deployment into Azure. So right now, we've got several large customers that have successfully and without issue moved Tidal into the cloud and have been running it there for several years. So we've got a pretty decent experience with this. We've got partners that are experienced in helping customers make this move. So whatever path you're looking to take, know that we're here for you. We can work with you, to help make that move as smooth as possible. Fred, over to you if you want to take it from here through a few of these slides.
Sure. So this slide, Tidal Automation Cloud-Enabled Installs, talks a little about what was detailed by Rick. Starting at the top, as mentioned, all those different clouds, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Google, they can be hosts to the components, such as the master, backup master, client manager. They can be host to agents. And remember that in the cloud, it's typically going to be Windows or Linux. And in addition to having the ability to install agents on Linux operating systems and Windows operating systems, one of the most recent enhancements is your ability as a customer to download and experiment with our Linux agent container offering. And then finally, remember that anything that's up in the cloud might be a possible target for one of our adapters, and we'll review our adapters when we get into the demo. Now, as indicated, this is a journey, so not everything comes out all at once the same across all the clouds. AWS was first, then Azure, then Oracle, then Google. So our AWS and Azure adapters are a little more mature in so much as during the master install, you can actually select an in-cloud serverless database, Oracle or MS SQL, in both AWS and Azure. So it's built into the install wizard to pick relational database as a service for your backend database for Tidal. Additionally, the master can integrate with cloud native SMTP, which would be for email notifications. And the client manager can integrate with cloud native Active Directory. And then notice the little asterisk at the bottom. Always stay tuned for future enhancements and additions. If you guys have been paying attention, we're marching forward, on lots of fronts, and cloud is one of the major ones. Next slide is an example of some of the targets that might be up in the cloud. So JMS and specifically ActiveMQ or ActiveMQ equivalents that are up in the cloud. We can target those with our JMS adapter. The Linux and Windows instances can be targets for our SSH adapter. They can be hosts for our SFTP agents. They can be hosts for our Linux SFTP agents that can also be configured as quote unquote S3 data movers, and we'll find out more about that in a minute. There's too many applications to count that could be up in instances in all those different clouds. And if we don't have a named adapter per se, typically they're going to be REST-enabled applications, which makes it fair game for our web services adapter to use them as a target. Additionally, there's all sorts of databases that might be targets. Oracle, MS SQL, JDBC as the actual server-based targets. So all of those adapters can target server-based databases. And I think coming in the future, when Tom starts talking about the roadmap, we'll find out that we're even going to be able to target the serverless relational database with adapters. Other example adapters, the ServiceNow adapter, another new adapter which has generated a lot of interest. And then coming soon to a master near you, Informatica Cloud, possibly Oracle OCI ERP. That might also be known by you as Oracle Fusion or Oracle ERP Cloud, and many others. And just because it's not on the compatibility matrix doesn't mean that it won't work with an adapter. The burden is on the cloud provider to make it transparent to other applications. So in terms of AWS specific features, we mentioned that we have some adapters that were designed for AWS EC2. So EC2 is Elastic Cloud Computing. So we have an adapter for that. And we can run jobs against instances kind of like an administrator to start and stop and terminate instances automatically, at the front end or the back end of a business process. Otherwise, you would have to do this manually, or you would have to try and ask or task someone to do that for you with a phone call, an email, etc. Also, we have the ability to copy AMIs. AMIs is Amazon Machine Image, synonymous with instance. And oftentimes those EC2 instances have disk associated with them, and that would be elastic block storage, the EBS volumes. And those volumes can be formatted in a number of different types of file systems. But you need to have an EC2 instance in order to access the EBS volumes that might be associated with it. As far as the S3 adapter, S3 is a little different type of storage. And in fact, you can get to S3 storage without even, having an EC2 instance running. So it's a little different storage, oftentimes a little more temporary, and many of the instances that you've spun up and that have, we'll call it their own local file system, will also have associated storage in S3. And so we have another adapter for that. Same kind of approach pattern in terms of administration. You don't want to have to be able to have to ask or task someone to create or update or delete buckets. You don't want to have to do that manually. You want to be able to do that in a verifiably reproducible manner, automatically in the context of an end-to-end business flow. And those S3 adapters are accessing what are known as buckets. You can kind of think of that as a directory that we can create, update, delete. And then in those buckets, they refer to what you could think of as files as objects. And so that adapter can also update, delete, copy, move, and rename objects. Next slide. Tidal automation AWS specific features also include the fact that you can take your Linux agent, which is already an FTP, SFTP, and FTPS client, and you can additionally configure that Linux agent, and it's only a Linux agent, to be what is known as an S3 data mover. So you can also think of that kind of like an FTP in so much as we're doing the equivalent type of file transfers, doing puts of objects into buckets, gets of objects from buckets. And because we have the S3 adapter, that also has an event action associated, well, actually a pair of event actions associated with it. So much like the standard agent file event, where we can sense the arrival of a file, we can also sense the arrival of an object in a bucket. And with that sensing of that event, we can trigger any action, really, any action that you might already be familiar with in the scheduler. But in this particular instance, there is a specific action known as an AWS Lambda action. And so if you don't know what Lambda is basically the ability to launch a snippet of code, if you will. And there's a number of different types of languages that could be written in. There's templates out there that you can use to build the code, etc. Next slide. Typical cloud business process, as we've discussed. Imagine, if you were to do this manually, right now, you might just leave your EC2 instances up and running. You might just leave your S3 buckets up and running. The downside to that is that you're incurring charges when you may not be using it. So in order to tidy things up, we're proposing that you prefix your business process with, the starting of the instances and the creation of the buckets, so that you can then start your processing. Move data, whether it be using an FTP to the EBS volumes, or whether you're using the data mover to put objects in S3 buckets. Then there could be some processing that's going on. So remember that those instances that we're bringing up, those can be any number of different types of applications. It might be Informatica, SAP, business objects. There's any number of types of applications that when they're up and running, they'll be using their associated local disk, the EBS disk. They'll be accessing the S3 buckets. They'll be processing data in that regard. And so that's where our Tidal, either named adapters or REST adapters, can come into play. Our Informatica adapter, our SSH adapter, and then again, if we don't have a named adapter, could be a REST adapter. Again, sometimes you're moving data in, sometimes you're moving data out. There might be more processing, but then when all is said and done, that's when we would destroy the buckets, stop the instances, and no longer be incurring charges. So again, the major idea here, right, is to not be incurring charges when you don't need to, and that we can automate your business process within AWS by prefixing and suffixing that business process with the ability to start up and create buckets and instances, and then bring the instances down and destroy the buckets. So let's see how that would play out visually. Right now today, it's a given that you're going to have a primary master, maybe one or two client managers, and a Tidal database on-premise, Oracle or MS SQL. The client manager and primary master on-premise could be on Unix or Linux or Windows. You might have a fault-tolerant configuration where you add a fault monitor and a backup master. But now remember, as we mentioned, all of those components can go up in the Amazon cloud, the Microsoft cloud, the Google cloud, or the Oracle cloud. And each one of those clouds, again, can have an army of different types of applications, many of them that we're going to be able to target with our host adapter framework. So we're not, focusing on any one in particular, but rather all of them in general. We have a number of different types of adapters. We can put them on premise. They can be in any one of those clouds. And in a hybrid affair, I could have a master on premise. I could be targeting some applications on premise. I could be targeting some applications in more than one cloud. And it's not unusual. Many customers and prospects come to us and say, yes, we're involved in more than one cloud. Sometimes it's a decision-making process. Sometimes they simply are using one or the other for their own reasons. So now that we've set the stage back to AWS in particular, remember that AWS adapter can start, stop, and terminate instances, copy AMIs, and snapshot EBSs. And that with the licensing of that EC2 adapter, there's an associated set of event actions for the events being S3 file arrivals, the action being Lambda code launches. Also remember that those adapter targets, again, different types of applications. They may not just be a Linux agent or a Windows agent. They could be Informatica, SAP, etc. And many times, not only do they access their local storage, their EBS storage, but they'll also be utilizing S3. And so those become targets for us with our S3 adapters. And notice that these are multiples. It kind of depends on what you're targeting. Sometimes you'll need multiple adapters for multiple regions, or you'll need multiple adapters for multiple users in order to access this bucket or that bucket. But once again, that adapter gives us the ability to create and update and delete buckets, copy, rename, restore objects, and then those buckets become targets for our S3 data mover puts and gets. And so in that regard, the agents that we install could be on premise, could be in the cloud, either along with an application in an application instance, or there might just be Windows and Linux instances that you bring up just so you can have an agent that can run FTPs, an agent that can do S3 data moves. And those agents can be in any one of the various clouds or on-premise, and a mix of all of that. And then finally, for those applications where we didn't have a named adapter, once again, they're all going to be REST enabled. And so there could be REST calls going from the master to on-premise applications, from the master to cloud applications. You might even be accessing an application on one hand with an adapter, and on another hand with a REST call. And then there's also REST calls that can go, between clouds, from one adapter to, or from one master to another adapter in the cloud, but even between the different types of applications. Not unusual at all. Rick, we have a new slide, Tidal versus AWS.
Thanks, Fred. So before we dive into the demo, I had asked to insert one quick slide because we've had numerous customers ask us about the AWS scheduler. It's free, so they've kind of asked us, what do you think about it? Have you looked at it? Is it something that we should consider? And so, we did a little bit of research on it, looked at it. We had some customers do the same, and we kind of shared data with them as well. But I think, like other point products like Cron and other native schedulers, there's significant limitations to the functionality of the AWS scheduler, right? So, first and foremost, it's limited in coverage. The AWS scheduler obviously only handles things running in AWS, right? And only really server sort of scheduling, right? So any workflows that are on-prem or that are running on different clouds, any application scheduling that you're going to do, things like that, not supported with the AWS scheduler. But even within AWS, we found really limited capabilities that are critical to most of our customers, right? So, calendaring, most people, everybody's saying the calendar is definitely deficient. There's not any of the complex calendaring that you can find within Tidal. There's no real dependency capabilities. There's no event-based capabilities. So not only can you not do time-based scheduling, you can't do event-based scheduling within it as well. There's no automated error recovery. They don't obviously have any pre-built adapters, right? So the adapters that Fred talked about, the application adapters, database adapters, web services, things like that, don't exist, right? We've been building those for 20 plus years, so a little different. No change management, no service level and resource management built into it as well. So, as you can see, a lot of functionality missing. But one customer I was talking to, our conversation really came back to, do you really want to trust your mission critical business processes to a company that's not focused on workload automation, right? I mean, the advantage to Tidal is we've got 30 years of development work, we've got expertise in this area. If you're going to call support, workload automation, you're going to get an expert, right? In workload automation, somebody that's all that they do. So I think it boils down to, you could use it. You could use the AWS scheduler, just like you could use cron, but, you kind of decided years ago that there was a better solution. So I don't know why you would go back, right? So I just thought it was important to point that out because we've been getting quite a few questions about it. Customers, obviously Amazon's pushing it and customers are just kind of asking. So enough on that topic. Fred, do you want to take it back and dive into the demonstration?
I will, and we would love to encourage all of our participants today. For those of you that interact with people that use AWS, they simply may not be aware of the difference or the difference between the native AWS scheduler and a scheduler like Tidal Automation. So we would encourage you to educate them and show them the difference. So let's take a look at a brief demo. And in that regard, let's bring up the GUI. So what we're looking at is Firefox. I browsed to the URL. I was authenticated. In this case, my client manager was authenticating with Active Directory. And just as a quick reminder, right, compared to the AWS scheduler, they're not going to have the breadth and sophistication of someone who might be involved in operations, someone that might be involved with definitions in terms of calendars and events, queues, resources, etc. We're going to concentrate not on operations just yet or definitions just yet, but on the administration. And in that regard, we're going to focus specifically on our AWS EC2 and S3 adapters. Many times the people go to make a connection and they start here, right? And again, here's a reminder of the different types of targets that we might have. And again, if you don't see a named target, there are ways, right? There might be a command line interface on an older application, but in today's world, targets, applications in the cloud are going to be REST-based, and that's where our web service adapter comes in. But in the same vein, you can install your quote-unquote on-premise Informatica, in an instance in the cloud. The same for many of these other types of applications. But for now, let's focus on our EC2 adapters. And the first thing that you might notice, and let me make this a little bigger. The first thing you might notice that I made a couple notes to myself, and you can kind of see that in the details, is that you would conceivably have more than one EC2 adapter because they, as you can see, they appear to be based on different regions. And for those of you that are not really that familiar with AWS, you can't just jump in and do this without having some familiarity with, some of the acronyms and some of the basics that EC2 is composed of AMIs, and that AMIs are Amazon machine instances, and that they need to be started and stopped, and they can be copied, and that their volumes can be backed up, that type of thing. But before you can come and make this connection, you actually have to start with what I'll refer to as a connect user. So there's no specific, heading of connect user. That actually falls under the heading of runtime users. And for those of you that are familiar with AWS, you can already pick out this one. And you're going, yeah, I think I've seen that, or this one. So what is that? So the username, the connect user, must be created in advance, prior to trying to make an EC2 or an S3 connection. And this username, what we call a username, is what AWS calls an access key ID, right? So you're going to need to know that user. You're going to need to know what region it's going to be able to access, and you're going to need to know its password, because that password is going to be entered into our database and encrypted in motion, encrypted at rest for both EC2 and S3. So step A, decide on what user or users that you want to use to create one or more EC2 connections. Once again, those connections, we start here. We have to hit the drop down. And if you come here and there's nothing listed, it's because you didn't create a user with a password, with an EC2 password. And then notice, this too might require a little translation. You may know your region as Oregon or Virginia. And so you might have to do a little correlation there to figure out, oh yeah, EU West is California, etc. So this information that's being displayed, though, is being brought back from our connection. And then there are times when a simple connection such as this doesn't work. You might need to connect with support and find out, what is the fancy string that I need to put here, that I need to override the default with. But in either case, having collected the right information in advance, and I think I might have changed that. I'm going to double check, or I'm going to pick a different one. You'll be able to test. That button should go gray, and you should get an indication that you're connected. Once that happens, depending upon, well, this may not, yeah, there we go. So that's going to give you the availability zone status. So again, as indicated before, if you're going, I don't know what that is, you need to, have a little basic information in regard to how AWS operates, and the fact that they'll have multiple availability zones for different regions. In that regard, we have seen an example of the EC2 adapter. Let's take a look at an S3 adapter. In that S3 adapter, same approach pattern, right? You don't get to change this, but you do need an access username. Should be able to test it, should be able to see that you're connected. So with administration done, let's go take a look at some job definitions. And I have some pre-made. And just as a reminder, right, for the EC2 adapter, I have the ability to stop, start an instance, and you'll get the idea here. And so much as I'll be able to pick from the menu, start, stop, terminate, snapshot, copy. Depending upon which user you picked here, that's going to determine which instance you're going to be able to operate with. So if you're not seeing the instance that you expect, then you're using the wrong user. But you're going to pick a particular instance, and with that, you're going to pick a particular function: start, stop, terminate. If we were to do, a copy, you can imagine that in that regard, I would have a source and a destination that I would have to fill out. Same for snapshotting volumes. In terms of S3, just a review again. Creating, updating buckets. And so depending upon which one of these operations you pick, you'll have variations on a theme in terms of general specifications. Notice that what's going on here, that colon actually creates a variable, and that variable can be filled with a Tidal automation variable. So that happens to be the rule ID, the job definition ID. And when you create buckets, you have the capability of varying access control lists, the capability of enabling or suspending versioning. And so that's very similar to what you're going to see in regard to create or update. With copies, oops, wait a minute, in terms of deleting objects. Let's leave that behind. Sorry. We talked about buckets, so creating, updating buckets, and the ability to move, rename objects. Let's take a look at one of those. And so, again, objects are like files and directories. Once again, here I'm updating an object, a file. I have different variations in terms of storage types and encryption, variations in permissions, variations in versioning. And then finally, the data movers, basically gets and puts. Notice that I'm not using the S3 adapter. Instead, I'm using a Linux agent configured as an S3 data mover, and that we're still using a particular Amazon user. And so if you're not seeing the S3 buckets you expect, then you're not using the right user. And then in terms of the actual operations, right, gets, puts, and multi-puts. And the ability to use, for example, variables, right? In this case, I was getting an object from a local file system, or getting an object from a bucket with this name, and then renaming it back at the Linux agent host with a variable. So now we have the general approach pattern. Let's take a look at some jobs that already ran. So here, once again, you get the general idea, similar to the diagrams I showed you before. Start an application, create a temporary bucket, put an object into the bucket that came from Linux, do some processing against that file, if you will, copy and rename that object from a temporary bucket to a final bucket, take it from the final bucket and put it back to a Linux target using, and this would be using an agent, and then delete the bucket, stop the instance, and then I have a couple here to just verify that that happened. The easiest way to go through this is just take a look at the job output. And we're waiting. We'll give it a little update here. Try this one. And here you can see that a particular instance has been started. Here you can see that a bucket was created with certain access control list characteristics. Here we did a put. So we took an object from Linux and transferred it into a bucket, and notice the use of variables. So these are unique identifiers, good for auditing and backtracking if something goes wrong. I do some processing of some sort, and that would be, for example, a application instance, processing, manipulating an S3 object in a bucket. Once that's done, maybe we want to take that processed object, move it into a permanent bucket as opposed to a temporary bucket. This is a temporary bucket. This is one that I use on a permanent basis. And then get that object from that permanent bucket and move it to a Linux target and rename it with identifiers, again, for tracking and auditing. Delete your bucket, stop your instance, maybe verify that the file made it as you expected. So this is a Linux directory listing. Also, remember that we not only have the ability to move files with our S3 instance, but not explicitly mentioned before, our S3 event has the capability of file disposition, where I can monitor a bucket, look for an object, and dispose of it in the following manners: move, copy, delete, rename, get. In this case, I actually did a get using the adapter, not the data mover, and I moved the file to a directory on the master. So maybe that's where I would have a master archive, as opposed to the files that I distribute out to various Linux boxes. And so when that is detected, the arrival of that file in that bucket, in this case, we launch a Lambda action. And actually, I'm going to see if this guy's back in the saddle. And so here we had a file event that occurred. We actually, on this system, I did a Lambda action, and I also sent an alert. What's that Lambda action look like? Again, the Lambda action is based on our S3 connector. We actually picked one from a particular region, and we're planning on launching that on an event basis. So if we now go and look at alerts, this was the, if we go and look at alerts, we can see this is the output of that event monitor, is that the disposition of the file was to get it and put it on the master. And then if we were looking logs, we should be able to find out when, and I think we need to go time here. This is where we raised our Lambda function and invoked a snippet of code on the EC2 environment. And with that being said, we'll pass this back to Tom. So Tom, let me stop sharing.
Thanks, Fred. And Rick, I think you need to give me presenter rights.
All right, bear with me here, sorry. All right, there you go, Tom.
All right, so thank you, Fred. Thank you, Rick. Let's talk a little bit about where we are and where we're going. So first, I guess in terms of positioning, Tidal's journey to the cloud and with the cloud, started with the 6.3.1 release, which was back in 2016, and so We've been on this journey now for almost 5 years. Our focus is on, making sure that resources in the cloud are, as easy to access as resources that are on premise or in a colo or everywhere else. The baseline, dependency in all of this is network connectivity. Tidal does not really care where something is running as long as there is network connectivity to it. And so with that in mind, we offer the ability to automate anywhere across, the landscape of on-premise cloud, partner, and SaaS environments, as long as we have network connectivity. Tidal itself can run on-premise or in the cloud. And, as Rick noted at the front, we have, focused our testing on AWS, Azure, Oracle's cloud, and Google's cloud. But we see and expect no issues at all in having Tidal run anywhere else or Tidal having connectivity elsewhere. If you're interested in other clouds, I saw in the the Q&A space, there was a question about government cloud. Reach out to us. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics, but from the perspective of where we're going to run, we're very, very confident that we will go and we will run anywhere, and we'll give you the ability to automate the applications that you have in the cloud or that are powered by the cloud or anything that is out there in terms of cloud services. So, the EC2 and the S3 adapters were released with support for AWS a few years ago. And as we've used them, as we've gotten feedback from our customers, we've recognized that there's a need to be able to go and expand out what they're offering. And so, we're in the process right now of working on a second generation of what we refer to as cloud command and control adapters. Taking what we've learned from the EC2 and S3 adapter, going and expanding that out, and then making that available across each of the clouds that we support, because we're really cloud agnostic. And rather than focusing on a single cloud, we want to give you the choice of where you're going to be able to go and run Tidal. And so, we'll continue with and expand the compute and storage lifecycle automation and the services automation that you saw Fred demonstrate here. We're also looking at how we can help to orchestrate the native scheduling functions that sit in each cloud. Rick highlighted the AWS back scheduler, but Azure offers something similar. Oracle and Google offer something similar. In many ways, they're taking the basic scheduling mechanisms, out of a tool like Cron and carrying them forward. And we want to make sure that in our interest of providing a centralized mechanism for control and a single pane of glass for being able to monitor, that we're able to bring that in. We are also looking at how we can bring in infrastructure as code tools like Ansible and Terraform into this. And again, I saw a question in the Q&A about Ansible and how would we compare and contrast. I think we're really working in a different plane from tools like Ansible and Terraform. They are very, very focused on orchestrating the the structure and deployment of infrastructure elements and ensuring that those elements are deployed consistently, that they comply with a standard set of profiles. You could use Tidal to go and do that, but a tool like Ansible or Terraform or one of the others out in the space is going to be better focused and a better fit for the team who's responsible for doing things like that. On the other hand, what Tidal brings to the table is the ability to do the coordination the spinning up and spinning down, whether that is time-based, whether that is event-based, whether that is dependency-based, because Tidal brings an end-to-end view of what's happening in the enterprise. And so the two are really complementary. And as we work at building out this second generation of adapters for the clouds, we're going to look at how we can go and we can bring them together so that you can take advantage of both of them, and be able to give the team that's responsible for deploying and maintaining the consistency of your cloud infrastructure, the tool that they want to work with, while orchestrating all of that with Tidal. Looking at it from a developer perspective, and this is in some ways an overlapping audience. Our objective is to enable enterprise and third-party developers to embed Tidal capabilities into their applications and business processes. And so with what we're looking to do with the cloud and with Tidal overall, we want to expand out those capabilities with adapters that are more tied to developer type tools, as well as API and command line support for the places that developers need to integrate Tidal capabilities into their functions. We have been, talking at past webinars about the fact that we recognize that we have work to do on our developer documentation. We have very, very complete API and command line guides. We are, we make sure that they get updated with all the API and CLI changes, in time and released at the same time. But we recognize that we need to do more in terms of telling you how to take advantage of this, not only with recipe books, but also with frameworks and code samples and environments. And so, that sits in the pipeline as well. And we're expecting in the second half of the year to be able to start to show you some of those. Additionally, we have a fantastic level 2 and level 3 development team, or support team today, but they don't really speak development. And so we're working right now to add in people to those teams to provide that type of support, because candidly, you're already asking for it. We're already getting the requests coming in, and we need to go and formalize that. We may need to expand out what we offer in terms of support services to fit your needs. All right, so let's talk specifically about the roadmap. Today, for cloud compatibility. Now that is, again, in terms of what we are testing, I'm very confident, and we've seen some customers test it, that there are other clouds out there that Tidal's going to work perfectly fine with. If you're in one of those other clouds, or you need to go and get to those clouds, reach out to us, contact your account manager, or reach out to me and my team at product@tidalsoftware.com and tell us about the places that you need to see us go, that you want to see us add to the compatibility matrix, adding in more rows and more columns to the matrix, so that we can go from a 8-point font down to a 6-point font and still get it to all print out on a really big sheet of paper. Also today we offer AWS and Azure native services integration, things like mail and messaging and other capabilities. As we take this forward, first piece that you're going to be seeing is, we're bringing out APM streaming. Now you're saying, well, how is that a platform element? Why is it relevant to me in the cloud? Well, what we're seeing is that as, we talk to customers who are running in these mixed environments, on-premise and in the cloud, that they are using APM streams and similar tools in order to be able to bring all of their operational data together, whether they're putting it into tools like Splunk, or whether they're creating data lakes. That, the broader that you go out with the platform in terms of the data sources that you're putting out there, the more you need consistent tools to bring it together. Also, at the same time, from the perspective of our agents and adapters, we are adding in auto registration to the Linux agent container. So what this will mean is when you instantiate that container, that agent will auto register back with the master so that you don't have to handle that in the first steps of bringing that, bringing that up. That increases the ability to take advantage of the elasticity, the ability to spin up new agents with new services on them, use Tidal to be able to automate what's happening, and then to go and shut them back down again when you need them. We are also been doing work on enhancing our FTP offering and bringing multi-step actions into the into the way that you can go and use FTP. If you looked at FTP in the winter release, those mechanisms had already been deployed in the agent, but you had to use a little FTP programming language in order to take advantage of them. Now we're bringing that forward into the UI to make it easy for everybody to go and use. All right, so as we look at the platform improvements as we go further out there, the cloud native services refresh and cloud marketplace deployments. Now, this is not going to be something that's all going to happen in the fall release. Rather, it's going to be a rolling basis for us. But where we have native services integration today for AWS and Azure, we want to make sure that those capabilities are available consistently across AWS, Azure, OCI, GCP, and any other cloud that we decide to officially support. We've also heard from some of you that you'd like to be able to get your Tidal instances or your Tidal agents directly out of the cloud marketplaces. And so, as we bring our containerization efforts forward, we will be making that possible so that you can, bring down a Tidal instance, bring down an agent, bring other elements down directly out of the cloud marketplace. You still will need to work directly with us on making sure that you have valid licenses for those instances where, at least for the fall release and going into early 2021, there's no magic that's going to happen about that, but it will allow you to spin up new instances and take advantages of them more easily. And then, as we look out there, we're already evaluating the SAP and cloud and the Pivotal Cloud Foundry based on the input requests that we've had. And we've also had some requests on, how can you help us better manage the network endpoints that I have in a multi-cloud and on-premise environment when I mix it together. I'm, bringing agents up in these, different clouds along the way. I need to tie them back to Tidal. My security team is getting freaked out because I'm trying to go and do all of this stuff dynamically. And so we've got some work in progress on that in order to be able to help simplify that. On the automation side, Kubernetes adapter, doing it, generically, and then, making sure that that works across each of the clouds that we support, as well as for OpenShift. The cloud command and control adapter, Gen 2, AWS first, and then Azure, OCI, and Google Cloud. Extending our database adapters to support RDB on AWS, Azure DB, and Autonomous DB, and then orchestration enhancements to the web services adapter that we offer, recognizing that you often need to do multi-step actions with the web services adapter. And we've recognized that through some of our own internal work, and we're looking to go and to make that simpler for you. All right, so let's talk about it on the developer side. So on the developer side, I'm going to approach this a little differently, and I will note that the items that are here in blue, I've already talked about, and I'm going to jump over. The items here in green are really new to how we talk about things. So first up, in capabilities, down in the bottom center, we are looking to add in additional adapters associated with developer tools. We recognize that developers want to integrate Tidal into their build and deploy processes in other places. Candidly, our developers do that as well, and our developers are already down the path of making sure that we have adapters for our in-house Tidal instance, because we use Tidal to go and build Tidal. And so we're going to bring that forward, and it'll be an additional track of adapters that we start offering. In terms of planning, we already have been working at improving the ways that you can program a schedule. We added in Job Factory and other elements in the winter release. We're now bringing out local variables, job group resources, job dependencies, and that will be available not only through the APIs, but through the UI as well. So it's really a cross element. In terms of platform agnostic, we're doing an update to our mainframe gateway. And while there are hundreds of you on the call here, I suspect that it's only a minority of you who would be interested in the mainframe gateway. But Tidal remains platform agnostic, and legacy systems have always been one of the strengths of what Tidal supports. And so we're bringing some new things and new ideas to the mainframe. And if you have interest on that, again, reach out to my team or reach out to your account manager for more information. Jumping down to the bottom, we have an airflow adapter planned. We're actually looking to bring that out as part of the summer release, and then a refresh of our big data adapter, Hadoop and the other elements that we already had. We're looking to refresh that, add support for Spark to it, as well as some other elements. And right now that looks to be on track for the fall. Continuing on, a few more things not already mentioned. In terms of being able to use the API embedded into what you're already doing, we're bringing out OAuth and token-based authentication to use with the API. In order to get around the security challenges that are created by processing SQL statements directly through the API, we're adding in a database query mechanism to our API that gives you the ability to go and access data in the DB without exposing us to the holes that freak all the security folks out. And then lastly, we're looking at bringing out a new adapter development framework, recognizing that some of you want to be able to build your own adapters. And I'll say that the adapter framework that we have today is complex, and it requires a lot of internal knowledge of Tidal. So we're really looking to go and make that simpler. And I'd say, look for that coming in the fall. And then the last thing, for those of you who want to align Tidal and its promotion of schedule and calendar information through the development lifecycle, there are additional capabilities that you're going to see with the summer release of the Tidal repository around being able to do bulk updates to jobs and better task management. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rick as our MC, and we can probably stick around for a few minutes to go and ask questions. And we'll make sure that we respond to all of the questions in a follow-up that we can make available on the portal. So Rick, pass it back to you.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you. Great information. Appreciate it. Yeah, let's go through a few of these. We're obviously not going to get to them all, but let's go through a couple. Can the AWS adapter, can it use Active Directory authentication instead of AWS key pair details? Anyone? Fred? Tom?
I saw that question in the chat. I need to confirm it. I believe the answer is yes, but that's one that I'd want to go in and verify before committing to.
Okay. There was a question about how does Tidal deal with auto-scaling VMs? Can VMs be programmatically updated to keep the list current?
So we have an auto-scaling function in AWS today, but it's one of those mechanisms that we have not made available across all of the clouds that we support. I'll also note that the auto registration for containers is our intent to go and handle that on a similar basis with the agent container. So if either of those two fit, then it's already in there today. If those don't fit, then we should talk some more. If you're simply waiting for us to bring this to the other cloud, then it's part of what I described as the native services integration and our need to make that consistent everywhere.
Okay, thank you. There were a couple of questions about licensing that I'll just real quickly hit. So people were wondering how the AWS adapter is licensed. It is bundled, so the EC2 and S3 both come with the adapter, and it's licensed per master. So you license it for your production master, and it's unlimited EC2 and S3 scheduling that you can do with that. One other thing that I think is important to point out is for agents, we do have VM-based licenses for cloud agents. Obviously, our physical server-based licensing doesn't really apply to the cloud, so we do have a little less expensive VM-based licenses that can be utilized for your cloud instances if you're running Tidal in one of these clouds. So just wanted to point that out as well. Let's see, the question about there are other vendors who support the S3 APIs. Are there plans to allow S3 adapter to support those?
Yes, it's one of the things that we're looking at with the refresh around the cloud command and control. I will say though that the element that we need to navigate there is, do we provide direct access to the underlying APIs across each of the clouds that we support? Do we supply some interface layer that allows you to write it once and have it integrate with many? And that's still an element that's on the table for us. So if you have, again, if you have an opinion on that, reach out to us. Let us know what you think about that and how you'd like to use it.
Okay, there were a couple you kind of addressed Ansible. There was a few of those. You addressed government cloud. There was a question about SharePoint and if we can work with it or if there are plans to.
Yeah, I saw that. I think that was for SharePoint Online, and provided that there is an API that we can work with, then I think the answer there is yes. But I believe this is the first time that question has come up, so it's something we need to go back and research.
Okay. Thank you. There was a question about a Sherwell adapter. I know there isn't any currently. I don't know if that's one you've heard before or not.
Yeah, I've heard it once before, so it gets another uptick to go and take a look at it.
Okay. Can Lambda handle SAP ABAP code? Putting you on the spot.
I'm gonna let Fred answer that question.
And I would let AWS answer that question. I am not sure, but I would presume with the flexibility that I saw for the Lambda functions is that if you can program it, then you can launch that snippet of code.
Okay. I don't know, guys. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to wrap it up and do the rest via? We'll just post them online. Do you think that makes sense? We're about 5 minutes over now, so.
Yeah, it's probably
want me to continue?
Wrap up.
Okay. Excellent. Well, once again, thank you everyone for taking the time out with us today. Hopefully you found this information beneficial. If you do have additional information, you'd like to see, more detailed demonstrations, you've got specific use cases you want to talk about, you've got other clouds, as Tom mentioned, or other things that you're looking to do, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to your account manager. You can reach out to me directly, and I can get you to your account manager if you don't know who that person is. You can reach out to Tom and the product team as well. But please, we want to, this is a journey, as Fred mentioned, and we want to continue to work with you to make sure that we support you on your journey wherever it's taking you in the cloud. So thank you once again. Hopefully you found this all beneficial, and I look forward to talking to all of you soon. Thank you very much. Tom, Fred, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.